Well, I have one additional question and one thought. I'll ask the question first. Do you think so now that there has been an element of competition inserted into this design, which most likely will not go away, because I think all three of us value competition very much. That being said, what now is our responsibility to contextualize competition in the right way? So that's my question to you both, and then I'll give you my response. But I'll give a backstory too. In our world, right, we do a ton of consulting for nonprofits at Mission Matters Group, and we talk about contextualizing business frameworks in the nonprofit space. There's terminology that's different. There's an ethos or an essence that might be different in how a nonprofit applies a framework that might be different than a for-profit. Not always, but a little bit different. So in this situation, if we're not all fighting the same fight, fighting the same battle, so competition does need to be contextualized. And I think kind of like what you said, the perspective of it and the words for it are very important. So introducing it into something that's supposed to help dudes get better, what's our responsibility for education?
What indeed? Yeah.
I think I immediately take this question to like outside of just competition. Like, what's our responsibility for education is the question. It seems as though you're asking, not just on competition, but maybe on all of the things that we're doing. So it's more of a philosophical question on what our responsibility is, or what we see our responsibility is on teaching others or contextualizing what we're doing for others. Is that
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it.
okay? That is a really good question, because I tend to land like at the end of my thinking on this type of a question, or this question, I tend to land somewhere along the lines of personal responsibility. It's like at the end of the day, we're responsible for ourselves, and in a way that if we're responsible for ourselves, we then are the type of person that is looking out for others, but those people are also responsible for themselves. So maybe for my kids is a good example. Is like I feel responsible for my kids as their father. At a certain point in their life, they will take on that responsibility, and there will be consequences for their decisions that are their responsibility, not my responsibility, unless I choose to make it my responsibility. But there's like a choice in there. It seems, particularly with the age of the men we're working with. I think the more responsibility we put on our shoulders to contextualize concepts or make sure we get it right, the less effective we will be. Where I think it's like we put that responsibility on those that are engaging with what we're doing, and that is part of the process of becoming a more developed human being, or i.e. a better man. So personal responsibility, we each take it seriously on our own and then bring that to the table. And it's not necessarily an organizational responsibility, although the fact that the three of us are committed to that personal responsibility then becomes an organizational responsibility. I don't know. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, Josh, but Tony, go for it.
What comes to mind is we want to avoid a situation where people end up feeling bad because we're competing, right? And how I think about that is, number one, if you do lose in a way that makes you mad, like that's something that happens. Like if you get focused on the outcome rather than the inputs, and then also comparison. Like when we get caught up in comparing ourselves and saying, I'm not as good as this, like that's a path to negativity and anxiety, despair. Part of what makes what we're doing, to me, interesting, and I think I think it's why we're on the right track, is any of the 10 men in Wild 32 is equally capable of being the best member of Wild 32. Like any one of us is.
Yep.
And
Because
how are you defining best there? Like getting the
fewest
least amount of-
spankings.
Okay.
Fewest spankings, right? So if this were a group where the competition is around running, then Josh is going to be, I don't know how a few of these men are as runners, but I would imagine that Josh is the best runner of the 10 of us, and he will be all the time. We could run this 100 times and Josh would be the best of us, unless he gets hurt, which, I mean, I might hurt him to give myself a better shot, but
That's
like
and that is an unintended consequence of some competition is
yeah,
that
it's like
very
you
scenario.
end up, yeah, you end up rooting for somebody else to fail, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what we're doing here is your ability to do it is a product of your, it's a product of time and attention, right? And that it's just, there's a challenge in finding the time, like Josh was saying earlier, that some of, if you've got kids, to go on top of the job, it gets more challenging. And yeah, attention is a challenge to find, right? But assuming we're able to do that, then like the way we've drawn this up, there's a whole lot of leeway for us to adjust it to who we are and how we go through the world, right? Where any one of us on any given day is the best or the worst at what we're doing, right? And so I think that aspect of it, that it's like is like, how well can you pay attention to this stuff and carve out the time to commit to improving in this way. And I find that to be, I think that's going to end up being really key. Like if this grows the way that we think it can, I think we've landed on a design for Wild 32 that we can welcome a lot of men into the fold on this thing in a way that gains momentum over time, and I think gives us a lot of juicy stuff to play with in terms of form and how to connect.